The national elections in Somalia are still mired in dispute. Analysts and international partners talk openly about the prospect of civil war. ADN TV is proud to present the ideas of Somali experts who are presenting solutions for the nation's current problem. Abdirizak Aden is the chairman of Farsight Africa Group Research and Policy Studies. He has advised Somali presidents and been a permanent secretary for the Somali Information Ministry. ADN TV's Daniel Farnard spoke to Mr. Aden, which we present in a 4-part series.
Welcome to Africa Digital News Television. We're joined today by Abdirizak Aden, CEO of Farsight Africa Group, and a political analyst who has an inside view of what happens in Somali politics. Today we'll be talking about the election crisis. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Aden.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you for having me.
Now let's start with a very general question. What is up with the elections now?
Well, I think let us probably go back. Generally, what we see right now in Somalia is the election stalemate, and the background of that is that you have an agreement, 17 September agreement, but generally, I think stakeholders are quite very far from each other. You have two federal member states, Jubaland and Puntland, but also Council of Presidential Candidates, which probably demanded a number of issues to be resolved. One, the issue related to it has to be the election commission appointed by the government has to be removed or changed. Number two, the issue of Somaliland, federal members of the election commission, and also number three, the issue of Gather region and the dispute about who is gonna elect or who is gonna propose the committee. But in overall, generally, the real issue is that Somalia has witnessed indirect election for the last decades, and what you see now is a systematic failure of indirect election, and 4.5 deepens the clan conflict, deepens the conflict between the leaders, between federal government of Somalia and the federal member states, because indirect elections is always a market for rigging. You can basically vote buying. You can remember 2016, although Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, he has succeeded to bring together federal member states, but also and federal government of Somalia. But at the end of the day, it has been a lot of election rigging and election too much of unfair. So what's happening now is that the indirect election is always a fantastic recipe for basically election rigging. And everybody, federal member states and federal government of Somalia, have their own candidate, presidential candidate. So the reason why 17 September election agreement is not working is that because federal member states have their own presidential candidate, Farmaajo is a candidate, so you end up in a situation where the fight is not about election mechanism, but it's about 16 MPs from Gather region. The question is who's gonna have an influence? Is Ahmed Madobe? If you follow the federal constitution, and if you follow the previous procedures, the right is with the Jubaland authority to have possibility to conduct election, of course, oversight from the federal government of Somalia. But on the other hand, there is no any reconciliation, and Ahmed Madobe himself is a president, but it is a disputed president. And what you see is that there has been a continuous conflict between federal government of Somalia and Jubaland leader. So at the end of the day, is about indirect election is a recipe for a conflict, a recipe for deepening the and at the end of the day, it makes busy Somali leadership to be focused on this kind of election issues, and the federal member states leaders are busy with how do you make sure. Said Dani, he has a very and good example is that there is always rumors he's himself a candidate, but on the other hand he might have also someone else to make him president. So the dispute is about how do you make sure the largest number of MPs, how do you get it?
We had a technical committee that made an announcement about 2 weeks ago that they had come up with a solution for the Somaliland representation, for the federal election team, for even Gato. And yet now we see that there are more stakeholders that want to be included. As you mentioned, the Council of Presidential Candidates, civil society, etc. Do you see the involvement of the candidates and civil society as being helpful to find a solution, or does this make it more complicated?
Somalia is at the crossroad. Will Somalia go to a civil war, or will Somalia go for peaceful election and transition of power, an orderly exit for the current leadership? Because if you look at it, I think President Farmajo himself is the leader of the country and is the president of Somalia. But unfortunately, what's happening now is that he is, as a president of Somalia, ruining his legacy as a president. What needs to be focused now is that how do you bring together different stakeholders, and of course, generally, there is no any clarity on who can participate the leadership conference on elections. But looking at where we are at the moment, I think it will be vital to bring on board the Council of Presidents representatives to the consultations. And of course, we have seen that kind of demand, but also civil society, because at the end of the day, both the Council of Presidents and also President Farmajo and the Prime Minister Roble has the national responsibility to make sure that Somalia do not go to civil war. And in order to avoid that kind of scenario, I think it's a core responsibility of President Farmajo to be more statesman and push for some sort of a consensus. And also, one of the main reasons is that if you make 7 leaders to make a decision and get in that, they close the room, and then there is no institutions, the parliament, a lot of institutions are not participating the consultation, and also international community are not participating. So that means we are at the end of the day, it is the wishes of the leadership are against each other, and those wishes change from time to time.
Join us Thursday for part 2 of our interview with Abdirizak Aden. He will be discussing the role of Somalia's neighbors in the election crisis.